What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports Behind Show. The Combine is this week, which means we're getting closer to the NFL Draft, which also means we're getting closer to free agency. So I have Braeden Guthrie, also known as Bengals NFL, on Instagram, joining me today. We're going to be doing a Bengals free agency mock and a Bengals 7-round mock draft. How you doing today, Braeden?
I'm doing great. We're kind of in that part in the off season where things are boring, but excitement's building up towards free agency and the draft, which obviously really starts this week with the combine. So I'm excited to really dive deep into this off season, see how the Bengals could look by this time next year.
Yeah, absolutely. The Combine is this week, which means we're getting ready to hear an ungodly amount of overreactions. The Combine is ridiculous. I think we've had this conversation before. It is probably the most overreacting thing in football. It's just ridiculous. We'll hear lots of things maybe blown out of proportion this week and different things, and just all sorts of just crazy overreactions this week with the Combine. But we'll be doing a Bengals free agency mock. We'll be doing that on FanSpeak. And in case you have not heard, the Bengals, franchise tagged T. Higgins, and he will be getting $21.8 million. So we'll make sure to have him with a one-year deal. And when you're looking at free agency for Cincinnati, it's really interesting. Some Bengal fans are wanting the Bengals to cut Joe Mixon. He's not. Well, he's available to be cut on here. We have a couple of players we could, restructure the contract, like B.J. Hill and Sam Hubbard. So when you're looking at restrictions, is there anybody kind of in particular you think the Bengals maybe restructure the contract?
I think B.J. Hill may be a really popular name to be his contract to be readjusted. He hasn't quite. He had a bit of a down year compared to 2 years ago, and when DJ Reader was injured, the defensive line just fell as a whole, especially that interior and on running plays. BJ Hill was just kind of a guy out there. We've seen Reader step up. Since Reader left, BJ Hill was struggling a tremendous amount. I think that shows that Reader was just making him look better, and the Bengals need to sign and draft people on the defensive line. What they do with BJ Hill doesn't change that, but in order to help, I think the Bengals will try and readjust his contract, realizing they need more defenders, more defensive linemen, and understanding that BJ Hill is just a bit expensive for the production he brings.
So when you're looking at the cap right here on FanSpeak, it has the Bengals about $45 million in cap. I'm assuming that's taking into factor with T. Higgins' franchise tag, because this is a lot less than it was when I was looking at this a couple of days ago. So they have about $45 million. We'll restructure B.J. Hill's contract here. Now we are up to about $50 million. So the Bengals will save about $5 million if they restructure Hill's contract. I saw one rumor saying that the Bengals, with B.J. Hill, he possibly could be a cut casualty. That makes no cap casualty. That makes no sense to me whatsoever, because you're already kind of thin with Reader being a free agent, and you cut Hill. We have no players who are really, starter worthy at defensive tackle really whatsoever. So we restructured B.J. Hill, and one of the biggest things in the Bengals offseason, obviously one of the top focuses is what they will do with T. Higgins, whether they trade him or extend him before the deadline in July. But another one is if they should cut Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon's cap hit is $8.5 million. Dead money is $2.7 million. The cap savings is $5.7 million. Do you think the Bengals should keep Mixon, or do you think they should cut him?
This is a challenging one. There's arguments for both sides. I lean towards keep with that because I think regardless if Mixon is on the team or not, they're not going to go for a high-end running back. They're not going to look to be taking one early. While they would add another guy, it's still not a very advanced room. And they don't really have another running back type like Mixon. Chase Brown, he obviously flashed a lot, but he's not going to be your power back. And Mixon isn't the best one, but you have a guy like that in him. And with 1 year being left on his contract, the Bengals looking to go all in. At least that is what I'm predicting. I think, and they also have loyalty to him, while the Bengals have done much better about acting like a business and not so much as, I'm not sure if family is the right word, but they've been over loyal. So I think they are pretty loyal to Joe Mixon, but I think he is on the team, and I think he, with his leadership, his passion, he not cutting him, saving that cap will not damage the Bengals too much.
And it's interesting because when you look at Mixon with all the allegations last year that were not really true with Mixon, and there's lots of talks about him possibly being released last offseason. When you look at this offseason, there's still rumors about him being released, despite this past year him having a pretty good season. But with the emergence of Chase Brown towards the end of the year, with him not having a ton of touches, but when he had touches, he played pretty good for Cincinnati. I think it is more interesting with them saving about $5-6 million. It's a pretty interesting topic. I feel like there's no definitive wrong answer. There's no definitive right answer. I could kind of get either way. Kind of like you're saying, there's no really wrong or right answer here with Mixon. I just feel like it's way too risky because when you look at Mixon, you might say $5 or $6 million, but realistically, I don't expect Cincinnati to go out and sign a guy like Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, Barkley if they end up cutting Mixon. And Cincinnati's they're not going to draft a running back super early. They would draft one of maybe rounds 3, 4, maybe get a guy like Braeden Allen, Will Shipley from Clemson, maybe something like that. But I just feel like it's too much pressure on a rookie running back, and it's too much pressure on Chase Brown, who, like I said, he's been good when he's played, but I don't think he's ready to take that next leap yet already and be the starter or the two backs, whether it's Brown and a rookie running back. But I just feel like it's kind of too risky to cut Joe Mixon. A couple other players here for a possible Cincinnati to cut. One player is safety Nick Scott. I'm kind of on board for cutting him. It seemed like he did not do hardly anything last year. Jordan Battle should have started over Scott. It seems like earlier in the year than what he did. Are you kind of on board with Cincinnati cutting Scott here?
Yep. I think that will happen. I don't even think that's a bit of a take. They're paying a lot more than what they're getting, and the fact that he's not even starting, I just don't see him being on the team by the time week 1 hits.
So with them cutting Nick Scott and then restructuring the contract of BJ Hill, they have about just over $52 million in cap space here. So it's really interesting. They've already franchise tagged T. Higgins. He will make $21.8 this upcoming season. And when you look at some of the Bengals, free agents this offseason, we have Tyler Boyd, Irv Smith Jr. That signing was terrible this past season. Mitchell Wilcox, Tanner Hudson, Jonah Williams, Reeder, Josh Tupou, Davis Gaither, Awuzie. It sucks. Boyd's my favorite Bengal player, but deep down, realistically, I know he's probably not going to sign. And he's probably going to sign with the Steelers, and that's going to tick me off a lot. So you don't know. Maybe the Bengals will attempt to kind of maybe sign a Boyd replacement in the offseason, draft one where they feel comfortable with Charlie Jones taking Boyd's spot as a slot receiver. We don't have any tight ends right now on the roster. Irv Smith Jr., Sample, Wilcox, and Hudson are all free agents. Jonah Williams, like I mentioned, is a free agent. I don't feel like Cincinnati or Williams has really any interest in him staying with the Bengals. Some of the top free agents for Cincinnati are Reeder and Awuzie. Are you kind of wanting Cincinnati to keep Reeder Awuzie? You think they should let both of them walk?
Awuzie, I think, just maybe a situation of it's time to move on. He certainly struggled a lot more since coming off the injury. Now, I am definitely not sold on DJ Turner. I think corner is still a position the Bengals need to look at, but with Mike Hilton and Cam Taylor-Britt and DJ Turner, who had flashes, especially early in the season, Awuzie is not going to be cheap. And so for those reasons, I think a contract with him is just not in the best interest for the Bengals.
And when you look at, Awuzie, this past season, when his first year coming back from a season and the injury, he was all right, but it wasn't as good before his injury happened during the 2022 season. When you look at Reeder, he is somebody who I feel like his injury this past year, it sucks because it puts the Bengals in a crappy situation. You don't know how much money he's going to want, but you almost have to re-sign him, I feel like, to at least a 1-year deal because the Bengals' run defense was inconsistent last year. But when you took Reeder away from the equation, the Bengals' run defense was really, really bad. If you do somehow cut BJ Hill, like I said, there was rumors I don't know how much truth there is to that. You have no defense tackles whatsoever. I don't really know the price for Reader. When the Bengals signed him several years ago, it was 4 years, $53 million. I feel like his time with Cincinnati, he's deserved at least around that average per year, around that, 13, 14 range. But with his injury, you don't know how hesitant Cincinnati may be to give him, a decent amount of money. When I'm looking at Reader, I'm looking at maybe like a 2-year deal, 3-year deal worth maybe around 13, 14 range at the max, I'd say. I know some people might see more, but like I said, you're hesitant and you don't know how much Cincinnati will be, inclined to give him more of a pay raise than he got before with his injury. Are you kind of looking at the same contract for Reader, or you think the Bengals should not even sign him?
I absolutely see that contract. I am not sure if that will be for the Bengals. I think the Bengals are definitely going to be really aggressive and still one of the top choices for Reader. This is just going to be a matter of unpredictability because we've seen teams just throw the money right at a player. And Reader has established himself. Bengals aren't just the only ones who've realized the impact Reader has had. Other NFL scouts and coordinators and front offices, they see the impact Reader has had. Now, the injuries, like you said, that will bring a lot of hesitation. But I could see a team throwing the bags. But if other offers are around that area, I think the Bengals will be able to re-sign him at that price.
So we'll attempt about a 2-year deal here worth, say, 27, 28, so about 13 and a half season for a Reader. So, I mean, it would just suck if Cincinnati were to lose Reader because it puts them in a really tough situation because, I mean, you're going to have to draft defense tackle rounds 1 or 2. Realistically, that might be the way to go anyway. So 13.5 for 2 years. He declined that, so we'll just bump it up to 14 real quick. And it's interesting because when you look at Reader, Murray Hobby, the Bengals defensive line coach Reader at Clemson. This is something I think that is going absolutely unnoticed throughout free agency. And Bengal fans haven't really talked about it. So Reader accepts $14 million per year for a 2-year deal. I put the guaranteed money high on that because, I mean, he's not going to sign for 10% of guaranteed. I know the Bengals are notorious for not giving much guaranteed money, but it's put that high to for sure know we would get Reader. But something that's going unnoticed with the Bengals this offseason, we signed Reader, so this situation won't happen. But if we don't keep Reader, this is something I would think people should keep an eye on. Like I mentioned, Reader and Murray Hobby have experience with Clemson together. When you look at Christian Wilkins, Murray Hobby was with Christian Wilkins at Clemson. Murray Hobby was with Christian Wilkins with the Dolphins. So the Bengals defensive line coach, Hobby, has coached Christian Wilkins at 2 different points in his career with 2 different teams. The connection there, I think, is pretty significant if we don't keep Reader and the Bengals, if they have interest in Wilkins, because we've seen in the past, Bengals, maybe position coaches or just their coaches in general, like to get players that they've coached before. Look at Lou Anarumo and Eli Apple with the Giants. Look at Zach Taylor and Michael Thomas, wide receiver, who, we kept him longer than we should have, but I feel like a lot of that has to do with Taylor and Thomas's time with the Rams together. There's several other players, like I already mentioned, with Hobby and Reader. So I feel like Wilkins is something definitely to keep an eye on if Cincinnati doesn't retain Reader. I don't think it'll happen, but I feel like that connection would actually, I feel like it kind of give more buzz about the talks about Cincinnati possibly getting Christian Wilkins in the offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been a very popular name. I think what hurts the Bengals in the case with Wilkins, he may be looking for more of a 4-year contract. And as of right now, I think the Bengals may be scared of that. But you make up a great point with the connection, with there just being longevity, and that really does speak value to a player. So if the Bengals aren't able to necessarily get Reader, I do think we'll see them being connected to Wilkins and them trying to get a contract done.
So we're able to lock up Reader on a 2-year deal worth $28 million. We look at some other players to re-sign. Tupou's out there. All of our tight ends are out there. Anybody else you're kind of looking at for the Bengals to maybe retain here?
Tanner Hudson's an interesting one because he's a restricted free agent. So I'm confident that he will be in the Bengals next year. No, you can make an argument. He is the best Bengals tight end right now. Drew Sample kind of stepped up at the end of last year, but Hudson was able to step in and be a good tight end and be fine. I think that's what we were expecting with Irv Smith. Then, yeah, that thing went disastrous. But Hudson showed he can be a fine tight end in this Bengals offense. So I do think it's important to try and keep him in stripes for next year, even if he's just a short-term player.
So Hudson, I'm thinking maybe like a 1 or 2 year deal worth $1.5 million, if that. Is that kind of what you're thinking here?
Yeah.
And it's weird because heading into this past season, if you would have said that Tanner Hudson was our best tight end, people would think you were crazy. But he played really good for Cincinnati this past season. Definitely exceeded, his expectations because he really didn't have any expectations. So he has 1 year deal worth $1 million. He rejects that here, so we just bump that to like $1.5 million. I feel like Sample, he's somebody who I could see Cincinnati maybe retaining because he's a guy who's never going to be worth that. Hudson still rejects it there, but with Sample, I feel like he's never going to be worth that second-round pick. We drafted him in 2019, but I feel like the Bengals, the way they've used Sample, he's kind of made most of that second-round pick. They've used him, in blocking, especially on third downs. But I feel like I would not be surprised if Cincinnati maybe brought Sample back on a 1 year deal, kind of similar to Hudson, a 1 year deal worth like $1 million, $1.5 million, something like that. I think that's something definitely Cincinnati would consider here.
Yeah, absolutely. Sample brought a lot of value to the Bengals offense, especially that last quarter of the year. I don't think too many teams are going to be too interested. Despite that, I think the Bengals will recognize the effect Sample had, and with that, and also just not what I think will be not a lot of other teams being interested. I think they'll be able to get a deal done with Sample pretty easily.
So we have Hudson signed, and then Sample. I don't get why they're declining this because this is exactly what their probably price would be around. So we do 1.7 for Sample. I know it's a little bit higher than what it should be. We're just trying to lock him up to kind of make this realistic, and he still rejects it. So we'll bump it up to 2. He's freaking greedy, but I don't know, it's interesting with tight ends because it seems like every single year, the past couple of seasons, it's been like a revolving door with Cincinnati. So we lock up Sample and Hudson on both 1 year deals, but it seems like a revolving door with Cincinnati, and you don't know if they're going to get that like starting tight end in free agency or whether it's in the draft. But I feel like locking up Hudson and Sample is not bad. If they're tight end 2 and 3, that's fine. But if they're tight end 1 on a championship contending team like Cincinnati, that's kind of a problem. So we re-signed Reader, Hudson, and Sample. Is there anybody else you think we should re-sign?
Looking down this list here, Josh Tupou may be a good one just to make sure we have a guy in the room. He's not much. He's definitely not a starter, but with the Bengals situation, even if they re-sign Reader, they just don't have enough guys or depth in that room. Like, I would take Tupou over Zach Carter. Zach Carter, well, I'm not sure bust is the word because it's only been 2 years and he wasn't a first-round pick. He was a third. I do not trust him at all. I think he's been one of the worst picks of that draft. You could maybe argue the worst pick. So, yeah, just getting somebody you're familiar with on a 1 year deal just to make sure you have a body in the room that worst comes to worst, you can cut them with essentially no dead cap. I think that's pretty harmless.
Completely agree. And when you're looking at defense tackle for Cincinnati, it just seems like we've been whiffing defense tackle picks recently. I mean, Zach Carter, I know I completely agree with what you said. He's only played about 2 years. People say, oh, he's only played 2 years. He needs to be in rotation more. He hasn't played enough snaps. He's not done anything. I mean, I know Tyler Shelvin was another example, a third, fourth round pick. Didn't do jack squat. I know me and you both hated the pick. And, oh, he's a great pick. He's going to be the next DJ Reader and all that. The only reason people like Shelvin being drafted to Cincinnati is because he played with Burrow at LSU. If he played at freaking Buffalo, nobody would care. It's just like it's crazy. But, like, especially day 3, because Shelvin was day 3. I think Carter was day 3 pick. But Cincinnati has – what is it?
Carter was a third-round pick with a comp pick, and Shelvin was a fourth-round pick.
Like, when you're looking at even rounds 3 and, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and anything 3 and later, it just seems like Cincinnati has been whiffing those picks, and they have to start hitting, home runs with some of those selections. So we lock up Hudson, Sample, Reader, and Tupou. You think that's it when it comes to re-signing, or anybody else?
I'm going to be completely biased and go with Marcus Bailey. I think he's a good special teams player, and he's just that. But, when Sam Hubbard had his Hubbard yard dash, he kind of pancaked Mark Andrews. It looked like illegal block in the back, but it wasn't. He initiated contact on the front shoulder. But, Bailey is a good, fine player who what you're getting when you put him on the field. And when I say bias, I'm biased because he went to my high school.
That's freaking awesome. I feel like you told me that before, but I completely forgot about that. That is super, super cool. So what grade were you in when he was still in high school?
Yeah, so I was actually in 8th grade, but his brother was in the same grade with me, who was, I don't want to say friends, but we were good enough friends to establish that connection. I played football with him, so I never went to high school with Marcus, but I've known them since before high school.
That's super, super cool. So is that the biggest player to come out of your school, or biggest celebrity?
He wasn't huge in the NFL, but Nate Webner, I think was his name. He played rugby, but then for United States, he went to my high school, but then the Patriots picked him up from rugby, and he was on them. He got a few Super Bowl rings. He played safety. He never started. He was a rotational player, but he had success.
That's super, super cool. I mean, where I live, there's like 800 people in our town. I would say the biggest person where I went to high school, somebody who was an actor. He's been in a couple of movies, but he's more so like a local director now. But I'm hoping, like, years from now, people will be like, who's the biggest person from your high school? And they say my name. I feel like that'd be pretty cool. Have some bragging rights to it. But
Thank you.
So we lock up Bailey. Anybody else you think we should re-sign? You think we go to free agency?
Yeah, I think we go to free agency.
So I feel like this is pretty realistic because especially with us cutting Nick Scott, us retaining Reader, Hudson, Sample, Bailey, I feel like they're all really realistic, scenarios for Cincinnati. So when you're looking at Cincinnati and some possible free agent targets, there's a couple of players here I'm really interested in for them to maybe sign. I know there's a couple of players you're interested in sign. One of them is Noah Fant. Like I said, the tight end is a revolving door the past couple of seasons. Fant had 32 receptions over 400 yards last year. He's only 26 years old, and he's played 5 years in the league. So he has already tons of experience. He has more upside, I feel like, compared to some of these other tight ends. Another player I think maybe Cincinnati looks at here, I know people are really eyeing Fant and Dalton Schultz, but I feel like Schultz is probably the premier tight end in this free agency class. So they might overpay Schultz because they really want that, not necessarily elite tight end, but the best tight end on the market. But somebody is Gerald Everett. I feel like this makes a lot of sense. I think I did a video talking about this last season, but Everett was with the Rams with Zach Taylor. There's already connection. We talked about it earlier. The Bengals like to coach players who had experience with from prior coaching experiences. Everett had 50 receptions last year for over 400 yards. And like I said, he was with Taylor in 2017 and 18 with the Rams. Everett's 29, Fant's 26. Everett's the more realistic option. I would prefer Fant because he's younger and has more potential left in him. But those are a couple players. A couple other ones. I already kind of mentioned Wilkins. And I know a couple other players, but who are you kind of interested in for Cincinnati maybe staying here in free agency?
Yeah, I completely agree with Noah Fant, and he's the tight end I'm looking for. Dalton Schultz. His expected market value is over $11 million a year, and I think that's going to be way out of the Bengals' paying range, and especially him being the tight end, like you said, he's going to be looking for a multi-year deal with high guarantees. So, yeah, I think a guy like Fant would be cool, but like you said, with the connections, I think Everett would be a really strong signing. Still fits the need. He wouldn't be too expensive. But he's able to help that Bengals out. If you can get him in that room, I just think you have some reliability. It makes the draft a little bit easier for you.
I completely forgot Mike Gesicki's free agent. I'm going to add him to the list too. But it just seems like there's several tight ends on the market, but I would kind of say probably take away Schultz. There's no really body like you have to absolutely get him. Like there's good ones, but no really great ones. So you think we should sign Everett or Fant here?
I'm going to say Everett just because I completely agree with you on the familiarity, just working with people who you know. That's been popular, like you've explained. So I think among all tight ends, what they're looking for, Everett is probably makes the most sense.
Are you thinking? I'm thinking probably around maybe 3.5, maybe a 2-year deal. Because it's one of those things you don't want to end up maybe in the same situation next year with pretty much everybody being a free agent. You get Everett on a 2-year deal. You at least have him locked up while Hudson and Sample are free agents. Maybe you have Everett on a 1 year left on his deal. Maybe you draft a tight end mid-round like Stover or Sennett from Kansas State. You're looking at maybe a 2-year deal here.
Yeah, I think so. And I think Tobin even mentioned earlier today at the Combine about it being a revolving door or something on the lines of that. So, yeah, I think the Bengals realize this. They're still not going to be going for top tier, but want to give themselves a tight end who's good enough to be a starter, but also if Brock Bowers falls and they absolutely love him, they can still draft him, and that doesn't change the significance of the Everett signing, essentially. So I would agree 2-year deal, around $3.5-4 million per year, just because I could maybe see another team be in the running. But yeah, I think you can get him on a 1 to 3 year deal, whatever, somewhere within that range for rather cheaply.
12 or 2 years or 3.5 a year. Like I said, the guarantee percentage is high just so we can get them locked up. But with Cincinnati, actually, I mean, we know the guarantee would be way lower. So we offer Everett. So that kind of takes away Fant for the time being. Let's see here. Somebody I like here is Dalton Reisner, the left guard for the Vikings. We both kind of discussed before. Cardell Volson is not that guy at left guard. He's not terrible. He's not great. But anytime you can upgrade, and especially if you're a team like Cincinnati who's going to compete for a Super Bowl this year, anytime you upgrade, you got to do it. Like Volson is just not that great of a starter. Right now, he's the weakest link on the offensive line. And if you get Reisner, who did not give up any sacks this past season, he's very flexible on offensive line. I think he could play any position except center. But I feel like that's something definitely to consider there. Maybe a 1 year deal worth $3 million or something like that. Ronald Bass of Cincinnati played free agency like other teams. Resources, Brown, Hubbard, Hill would really help get that chip. Yeah, I mean, if they restructure the contracts, Hill restructures contracts, so we get a little bit more money there, so we can have more money to sign guys like Gerald Everett, Noah Fant, some of these guys. But Reisner, I'm kind of looking at a 1 year deal worth around $3 million. I know Connor Williams is available. Don't you like him a decent amount?
Yeah, I like him a good amount. He was one of my draft crushes back when he was drafted. I was definitely a bit too high on him, but he's definitely somebody who's a clear upgrade from Volson. has traits to play the tackle position. So, yeah, I think he would be a good starter. He's not going to bring anything extreme. He's not going to have some crazy breakout, but he's an upgrade from Volson, and you know exactly what you're getting with him when you put him on the field.
So would you rather offer Williams or Reisner?
I would say Reisner, despite my likeness for Williams. I think with Reisner, you're getting more reliability. Like not allowing a sack last year, like that's just too good not to pass up. That's at this level in the NFL. That's not lucky. You have to show pass blocking efficiency, and that's what really excites me. And just not him, and also a guy who's been popular among Bengals fans, Jermaine Elumore. I probably said his name wrong, but he's another guy who I could definitely see the Bengals considering, especially with the flexibility of guard or tackle. And he's another one who did not give up many sacks, struggled a bit in the run game, but you're going to keep Burrow up by signing guys like that. So by getting Reisner, you're getting a lot more stability at left guard, somebody who makes the offensive line better and most importantly protects Joe Burrow.
So we'll offer Reisner just a little over $2 million on a 1-year deal. But I feel like, kind of like you're saying, the stability and the reliability, and you have that insurance policy if somebody goes down. So if you get Reisner and we sign a Luminor and Latham or Fuega, the guy from Oregon State's there at 18, and we still want to left to take a right tackle, I feel like we could do that. I mean, you put a Luminor at left guard. That would give us Reisner not starting. We would give a couple million to a guy who's not starting. But I would rather give a guy a couple $1 million, a guy like Reisner who has that flexibility to play multiple positions, and you have that insurance policy if somebody goes down, because you don't want to be in a situation where, say, we get a Luminor at left guard, we got our rookie right tackle, and somebody goes down, and then we're screwed. I'd rather have that just insurance policy to make sure we have that backup who can play multiple positions, and Reisner would be that in that scenario. So when you're looking at a Luminor, he's somebody I've really looked at too, and I think that'd be a nice signing for Cincinnati. He's defended Burrow on Twitter. He's expressed his desire to want to beat the Chiefs. I know lots of Bengal fans on Twitter have talked about him, possibly coming to Cincinnati. Trying to find him here. Well, crap. I don't see him. He must have got tagged or signed. So the other top name that comes to mind among Bengal fans is Trent Brown. I prefer Luminor over Trent Brown because Brown is good. He's freaking massive. He's like 6'6", 360 pounds, like built like I don't even know what. He's huge. But when you look at Brown, he's missed quite a bit of games the last couple of years. And I feel like that's something that's kind of going unnoticed. Lots of Bengal fans are wanting Brown. Oh, we get our right tackle. This is a significant upgrade over Jonah Williams. It is, but I feel like people aren't really talking about the downside of the effect that he's missed 29 games the last 5 years. That's something you have to really look at when you're going to sign a guy who is going to protect Burrow possibly for the next couple of years. It sucks because I honestly was really hoping I'd much rather have a Luminor. I know he's not as good. He won't cost as much money, but he kind of has that flexibility, and he's less likely to get injury prone. So when you're looking at Trent Brown, are you looking to still get Brown here maybe? Or do you think maybe they should sign a different right tackle?
I am completely staying away from Brown. He's, from a pure talent standpoint, he's probably the best offensive tackle in free agency, but the best ability is being available. I was doing some research about him earlier today, and it's just not him and how many times he got hurt. 3 of his last 4 seasons, he started less than 10 games. In 2020, 2021, he didn't even completely play 10 games. 2021, it was only 5 games. So, yeah, he has all the talent in the world, but injuries have consistently been an issue for the Bengals. So I just cannot have faith in signing Trent Brown and counting on him to be healthy.
And it's one of those things that kind of puts the Bengals in a more difficult situation because when Luminor, you take him away, it kind of puts you too much pressure on Brown. So, like, your expectations of Luminor or Brown, but you strike out on both. and your expectation is really high, then your reality is pretty low. Like you said, Brown's probably the best offensive tackle on the market, but you just don't want to risk giving a lot of money to a guy you don't know how many games he's going to miss. So, who are some of the right tackles you're kind of looking at here for Cincinnati? I'm kind of looking at maybe George Fant or something like that, but I don't know. This is a situation where I really hope Cincinnati does not get themselves into.
Yeah, this is just as I take a look at the list right here. See, Becton's a guy who intrigues me, but I'm just too concerned about the off-the-field issues and just Frank Pollock's history of developing players, because there's no doubt he still has a bunch of potential, but he is just a mess.
And when you go ahead,
I was just saying, I think I may have to agree with you for a guy like Fant in this situation. Somebody who you know you're kind of getting with, and if he's starting there, not ideal, but life could be a lot worse.
And it sucks because you look at a guy like Becton, who, like you said, has a ton of potential. If you're Cincinnati, I know it sounds dumb, but stay away from potential if you're an offensive lineman in the offseason. Cincinnati should not sign any offensive lineman who has potential, because that means he's not where he needs to be and he's not reached his full potential, and you haven't seen the best of him. We can't develop a freaking offensive lineman to stay alive. So why would we have a situation where we would sign a guy like Becton, who's unproven so far throughout his career, has been a bust, and you're relying on Frank Pollock to, kind of revive his career when he's done nothing to develop offensive linemen? We've looked at, Volson, Jackson Carman. There's just been so many offensive linemen the Bengals have really not been able to develop, and I completely agree what you mean there with Becton. Fans, I would maybe look at 2-year deal worth like 7, 6, 7, something like that. Because this is a guy who I can maybe see them having a 1-year deal, but you want to have, I would say, an extra deal just in case you don't draft a tackle early. You want to have that kind of insurance policy, like I mentioned. So you would have Fant locked up 1 more year, and then maybe the following draft, not this year, but next year, then you draft a tackle early. Is that kind of what you're thinking here? About 6, 7, 2-year deal for Fant?
Yeah, I think the drafting a tackle is definitely a priority for the Bengals, but they also know their history of developing, even though guys like Pollock and Taylor may think, oh, we'll get it figured out. They also have that in the back of the mind, and they just can't throw out a offensive tackle right from the draft. But they could, but that's very scary. I think they recognize we got to get somebody in here. We can't rely on development.
So we've offered Fant, Reisner. I can't remember. It was a couple other people. I just can't remember the top of my head. So we'll just go ahead and see. Let's see here. Done submitting offers. So we'll go ahead and see who signed. So we signed Reisner and we signed Fant. Oh, we didn't sign Reisner. So we only signed George Fant. We signed him to a 2-year deal worth $7 million. So we struck out on Everett and we struck out on Reisner. So far this free agency has not looked too kind for Cincinnati. So when you're looking at tight end, we didn't get Everett. He's still available. We also have Schultz, Gesicki. We'll try Everett one more time. We'll bump it up to like a little over 4. He's not probably going to get this money, but we're just trying to be realistic here. And I think this is kind of the most realistic option when it comes to Cincinnati and a tight end. Let's see here. So guard, there's not really many guys that stand out at guard. Anybody you kind of looking at here for a possible Bolster replacement? You think at this point maybe we should try for the draft instead?
Is Williams still on there?
Yeah. No, he's gone.
That's depressing.
It really is. This sucks.
It is. I'm not seeing a guy that really speaks out to me, or somebody who I feel confident is like immediately better than Volson.
But
yeah.
This is literally worst case scenario.
Better get out of the way now versus real life.
But so we signed Fant. There's no really replacement for Volson right now. We offered Everett. We'll see what he accepts. See what he does there. Any other players we haven't mentioned that you're kind of interested in for Cincinnati?
Not seeing a receiver I would feel necessary to sign. You know, we are in a bit of a weird place with wide receiver as a whole. As we talked about, Boyd is essentially gone. There's probably very little chance he is in a Bengals uniform. And like you said, probably a Steelers one, which is very depressing. But yeah, they still have T. Higgins for one more year. His complete future is not known at this moment. Andrew Iosivas showed a lot of potential, and there is one position you want to rely on the Bengals developing. It is receiver. However, he is not a slot receiver. Charlie Jones, we haven't seen enough. He got injured, but he's kind of a smaller guy, so this could be an overreaction, but you still need to start thinking about with his size, could he be getting injured a bit more than you would like? However, I don't see a receiver in this free agency class that I think would be a necessary signing to replace Tyler Boyd, especially when you look at this draft class and how loaded it is. I think you can get away with not signing a receiver.
I agree. I feel like just if I had to sign a receiver, I feel like Reynolds kind of comes to mind because he was with Taylor with the Rams. I think Taylor was a wide receiver coach. I could be wrong with the Rams when Reynolds was there. And then let's see here. Curtis Samuel was available. I don't really think necessarily the Bengals should sign him, but I kind of hope they try to at least attempt to maybe sign a speedy receiver, whether it's in free agency, maybe they draft one. Any defensive lineman, linebacker, corner, anything like that. I could take that back. What?
Oh, punter, yes.
Yeah. What's this? Townsend's gone too. This sucks. You can't have nothing nice.
Nothing at all. I would still Jake Bailey, he's somebody I'm fairly familiar with, so maybe go for him in this case. But really anybody, just not Brad Robbins. And yeah, we always say it doesn't take 1 year to define for somebody to be a bust, but Brad Robbins is a bust. Wow.
Yeah, this definitely did not perform like anybody thought he was going to. So we strike out on Townsend. We strike out on Connor Williams, Reisner, Everett. Well, more than likely Everett. Fans. Like, if you're looking at the worst case scenario for Cincinnati in the offseason, you're looking at it right now. Like, this would be atrocious. Let's see here. Any linebackers, edge, tackles you're looking at here?
Nobody's speaking out to me.
I'm kind of tempted just to offer Wilkins because like $15 million. I know he'll decline it, but I mean, the rate this is going, Cincinnati will have way more cap space than people will kind of think. I would just really hope this is not the scenario that happens for Cincinnati. But yeah, this is not good. So we'll done submit offers. We'll see if we'll get Everett, and they both decline. So the span of all of these offers, we've signed George freaking Fant. Quite the offseason. Nope, like this would suck.
Yeah. I have a pretty strong feeling this will not actually happen, but the AI is not nice today.
Yeah, we're trying to make this most realistic as possible. Realistically, I feel like what we're doing is the most likely scenarios in free agency. But for whatever reason, they're just not accepting our offers. They're being freaking greedy. But so we offered Everett. We'll offer Bailey. Just screw it. We'll just give him like $3-4 million. He's not worth that. But just so we can say we signed more than one player.
Yeah.
Be like, oh, you did a free agency mock for an hour and a half. Who'd you have the Bengals sign? George Fant. Who else? That was it. So,
But
what is it?
I was going to say, well, we were joking right now. Unfortunately, and like I said, I don't think it's going to happen. Sometimes teams do suffer this in the offseason. They just keep being left out. They're just a little bit short. Then next thing you know, all the other people are signed.
Yeah, this is just not going to rate anybody. I feel like expected. Ronald Best. I like Mooney, but wait till the draft. Yeah, Mooney's the guy who seemed like his rookie year showed some promise for Chicago, and just after his rookie year, never really got better. He just kind of stagnant. He never got better. If anything, he got a little bit worse. But we'll see if Everett and Bailey. So Everett declines. We're done freaking offering him. I've offered him 3 deals. He's declined every single one. Screw it. I'm just gonna offer. Would you rather offer Gesicki, Schultz? Everett's off the table. I
think Gesicki may be a bit more realistic. He's going to be cheaper than Schultz and probably more what the Bengals are thinking as we go into free agency.
He's a guy who, last offseason, lots of Bengal fans are wanting. He is stupidly, sneaky athletic. For his size, you would not expect him to be athletic as what he is. But he's really tall. He has a great vertical jump. He can go get the jump ball. But he's really, really underrated. I would like it if they got him, if they strike out on Fant. But realistically, I think Everett's the most realistic option for Cincinnati. So we'll see if we get Gesicki, and of course, he freaking declined. This is terrible. We're going to have freaking 17 days here, and the only tight end left is going to be Jordan Atkins. That would suck. You think just say screw it and draft? Because they're not going to have a choice. We're going to have to draft them. They won't have the option to decline us drafting them.
Yeah, that's just may would have to be at this point.
So you're looking at this free agency mock, you're just tuning in, and if you see that, we signed nobody, it's not because we didn't try, it's because we just could not get anybody to sign with us at all. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now my computer's freezing. Now, this is fantastic. So we ended up, let's see here. I'm going to skip the rest of free agency. So we cut Nick Scott. We restructured B.J. Hill. We retained Reeder, Hudson, Sample, and Josh Tupou, and Marcus Bailey. The only 2 freaking players we signed were George Fant and Jake Bailey. What an offseason.
Hey, we got our punter.
We did, but we struck out on Everett and everybody. But, yeah, hopefully this does not happen. And I mean, if you've been watching, we've done a mock simulator for about 45 minutes now. We signed a punter. That's pretty much it, because nobody will crap. And forgot PFF only does 7-round mock drafts, 3-round mock drafts.
Ooh.
This has just been a disaster, to say the least. We're going to do PFF, but we'll do PFN. Just because PFF only does 3-round mock drafts. So let's get that up here. So just tuning in, we kept Reeder, Hudson, Sample, Tupou, and Bailey. We signed George Fant and Jake Bailey. So not the offseason Cincinnati's really looking for. The offers, kind of like we mentioned, they're much more realistic, I think, than the players that we offered. They're pretty realistic, just for the reason they were not accepting our deals. So let's see here. We got that up here on PFN. You think the Cincinnati should maybe trade the pick, or you think they should maybe stay at 18 here?
I think they should definitely entertain it, but just based on history, I doubt they will make a trade. At least in the first round, we've seen them trade down. a few years before, but that's always been days 2 or 3. They usually settle where they are in the first round, so I believe they'll be picking at 18.
I'm kind of the same way. I feel like they should definitely entertain the idea, but I mean, we know their history. It just seems like if they're going to trade back, it seems like if it's not an early second round pick, they're not going to trade back. For whatever reason, there's been several instances where they've had an early second round pick and they've traded back to get extra. When they traded back to get Mixon, they traded back to get Carmen, traded back to get Sample. There have been several situations. But I just feel like right now, especially how this free agency went, there's too many glaring holes. They have to take a player at 18 unless there is a absolute hole of an offer for Cincinnati. So we'll go ahead and take the pick here. Fuega is available. Let's see here. The offensive tackle from Oregon State. Nate Wiggins, a corner from Clemson. Jackson Powers Johnson, he's a guy who's really been picking up steam. Some Bengal fans are wanting Cincinnati to get him. Any certain position you're kind of looking at here?
I definitely am looking at offensive tackle. Fuega is somebody who's on top of my board, somebody that makes a lot of sense for the Bengals. With Bowers being gone, tight end is not something I am looking at too hard here. Oh, and we can take a look at the interior defensive line, see how's that shaping up.
So we have Murphy, Taylor, Sweat, Hall, all available. This is a situation I feel like, regardless if it's maybe round 1 or 2, I think Cincinnati's definitely going to take a defense tackle with one of those first 2 picks, because if we keep Reader, we still kind of need somebody to kind of slowly, take his spot, because I don't think he's going to sign a 3-4 year deal, maybe a 1 or 2 year deal, kind of a prove it deal for Cincinnati. But pretty good defense tackles here left. When you're looking at Fuega, he's just kind of hard to not take here, I feel like.
Yeah, I completely agree. He's exactly what the Bengals are looking for. So, like we kind of talked about earlier, there is the bit of fear of them developing linemen, but Fuega is a great prospect, would be great value at 18. So that's a pick I would not complain about. A pick I think would be a good one.
And it's one of those situations, he's probably the best tackle available. It might be debatable. It's a great pickup for Cincinnati, but you always kind of have that in the back of your mind. He might not pan out. And it's one of those things, you don't want to feel that way when you're drafting, because if you have that same kind of thought process, you're be like, oh, you're never going to take that player, because you're always going to have the thought in your back of your head because we can't develop offensive linemen. But at some point, they have to get over the hump and they have to develop an offensive lineman. Hopefully, if they take one at 18, that will be the player that kind of ends almost as if it's a curse for Cincinnati. So they finally have a good offensive lineman that they've developed and they've desperately needed for so long. So round 2 here, we're not going to probably take him here. It's pretty early. Malachi Corley is a guy I like a ton. His yards after the catch is freaking ridiculous. Played pretty good against Ohio State this past season. 2022 season, he had the most yards after the catch of any player in the country. Looking at tight ends, Jatavion Saunders from Texas available. Sennett's available. Defensive tackle Leonard Taylor's available. Sweat, Chris Jenkins from Michigan. A couple players maybe keep an eye on there. Nobody really stands out in the secondary for me. I'm kind of more so looking at maybe defensive tackle here.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I'm kind of thinking about here. I think any of those top guys listed would be a good pick, really good value. There's no guy over the other I feel passionate about that I would have a rather take. I haven't completely finished scouting interior defensive line. But all those guys I like, do you have a favorite among them?
Not really. I'm kind of more so on Taylor and Sweat. I feel like they're the best 2 at the position, and value picks, they're probably going to be the best value and also team need picks here. So if this was an actual scenario, I think Cincinnati would be pretty stupid if they don't elect to take a defense tackle here, strictly because Taylor and Sweat both should probably be gone. We've already mentioned Cincinnati is probably going to take a defense tackle the first 2 picks with one of them. So we'll go ahead and take, I guess, Taylor here, the defense tackle from Miami in round 2. It's a really, really nice value pick there for Cincinnati. So round 3, the 80th pick overall. This is where it gets interesting. You don't know if they might take a running back, wide receiver, depending who drops, a tight end even. Just looking at these players right away, there's a couple of players that stand out. I really like Braeden Allen. I know some people don't. He reminds me of Jonathan Taylor, a bruising running back who run right through you. He might not be the quickest running back, but he's a power back. Will Shipley is a guy who seems like he catches out of the backfield quite a bit. He would not be a bad idea, especially it seems like when you look at Cincinnati, the past couple of years, they've been getting more of their running backs in the pass catching game. So Cincinnati might be kind of inclined to get him over Allen with them getting running backs more involved in the pass catching game, like I mentioned. Ben Sinnott, the tight end from Kansas State, is somebody I think would not be a bad pick here because we did not sign a tight end. And it just makes a lot of sense. He's all around. I think this is one of the best tight ends in this class. He has a great grade when it comes to run blocking, pass catching. He can do it all. He doesn't do anything absolutely amazing, but he does everything really, really well. Looking at some defensive players here, Trotter should probably be gone, but with Wilson and Pratt, I don't really feel like you should take Trotter when there's other players who are equally as good and there's more team needs. But Ben Sinnott, the tight end from Kansas State, he's kind of who I'm probably looking at here. And with round 3, any certain player or position you're looking at here?
I have to agree with you on Sinnott. The Bengals, like we said, we need a tight end. It's not like this is a reach or anything. And like we always say, you can't rely on the draft to fix team needs, but sometimes it just falls into place. And I think that's a situation here.
So we'll take Sinnott, how you say it, from Kansas State. Dude, this absolutely sucks. PFN is freezing. So everything that could go wrong today in this video has pretty much gone wrong. I don't understand why it's freezing. This sucks.
That's how it works, isn't it?
Always. Only when you do lives. Pre-recorded videos, it's fine. You do a short or something, it's fine. But when you get a live stream, that's when everything goes to complete crap. So let's see here. All right, now we got it to work. So we got Ben Sinnott, the tight end from Kansas State in the 3rd round. Really nice value pick. I think it would be hard for Cincinnati to get a better value pick here with them getting him in the 3rd round. So the 4th round, 116th pick overall. Not any really running backs I'm kind of wowed with here. Any ones you're kind of interested in here?
I don't see anybody that wows me. At this point in the draft, this is where it gets rough outside of like receivers and running backs. This is where it gets difficult not knowing who exactly is who. That's why the combine's so exciting. But yeah, I don't see a running back that really speaks out to me. Want to possibly take a look at the guards and offensive linemen real quick?
I'm not even going to lie. When it comes to day 3 offensive linemen, I don't know much about them.
Yeah, same
know
here.
More so skill players. And honestly, when I do mocks, I normally stay away from offensive linemen and day 3 picks because my kind of philosophy is if Cincinnati can't develop a 1st round pick, they're not going to develop a 6th round pick. So I never draft them. Normally I feel like they're a waste to pick. There's some exceptions like Zach Zinter here. I don't think Ben would be bad with our next pick. Foster, if he's available. Missouri isn't bad. And then Driscoll from Marshall, like one of our last picks or something. But aside from those guys, I really don't know much about the offensive line when it comes to day 3s.
Yeah, and that's the same with me. At this point, I'm just kind of looking for guys who I'm familiar with. I don't want to act like I have a deep scouting report on all these guys because I don't. So, yeah. But, yeah, I agree. Taking an offensive lineman here for the Bengals is not their best strategy. I could just see them doing that, but they could go a million ways here. They could go receiver.
With receivers, somebody kind of stands out to me is Ricky Pearsall. I think he's had 147 targets the last 2 years. He's only had 3 drops, and he's somebody who it seems like he's kind of gone under the radar despite playing in a big school like Florida. But with all these top wide receivers the past couple of years, some SEC teams, like Thomas from LSU, and several other top wide receivers. There's so many great receivers in the SEC, and Pearsall has just never really got the credit. He's kind of deserved the past couple of seasons. He's somebody I'm looking at. And then Marshawn Nealon, I know some people are really, really, really high on him. Some people aren't so high on him. I've not really looked at much about him. But kind of, I would say Pearsall is kind of who I'm looking at here in the 4th round.
Yeah, I would have to agree. And like we kind of talked about earlier, the Bengals are so good at drafting wide receivers. If only they could put at least 20% of that talent into scouting and drafting offensive linemen. But here, there's a lot of receivers. The Bengals have a history of developing them, and they have been successful at it. So I definitely think this could be a good pick, give you a little flexibility with T. Higgins, give a little more time for Iosivas Jones to play together. Also, the rookie receiver, you don't have to push him in. So I think this could be a good pick that could be a potential future starter for the team.
Another receiver I like, if we didn't get Pearsall and if we did not take a wide receiver yet, I also like McCaffrey from Rice. He's McCaffrey's brother. He was really good for Rice this past season. Had about 1,000 yards or so, 89 touchdowns. You're looking at just different positions here. Defensive tackle, edge. It's so weird. I don't get some of these big boards. They don't make any sense to me. Jalen Green, I think, is one of the best edge rushers in this draft class. He's from James Madison. In, I think, 9 games, he had 15.5 sacks or something stupid. Like, it's something insane. You can't even get it on Madden. But he is a beast. I don't get why he's so low on here. He had 5 sacks against Marshall this past year. He was in Fancher's face every single play. He was pressuring Fancher, sacking him seemed like every other play. He's an edge I wouldn't mind in the later rounds, not this early, but I don't know. It's interesting because we already took McCaffrey. There's a couple of running backs I like, but I don't really want to take one right now. I'd much rather get Ali from Marshall in the next round. I know some people might say I'm biased, but people saw what Ali did early in the Senior Bowl practice. He's been the most underrated running back in football the past couple of years. He would be a great option in later rounds, but right here, I just don't really see anybody that I'm absolutely wowed with. Foster is still available. Zach Zinter is still available. I don't know, because I'm kind of looking at maybe one of those two guys, maybe more so Zinter, to kind of give maybe some competition toward Volson. I know I'm kind of contradicting myself. I know I said I didn't like drafting offensive linemen, but I'm just kind of being realistic because there's nobody really stands out and then get some more depth at offensive lineman. That's something we really didn't do when it came to free agency.
Yeah, absolutely not. I could see this pick being Ali. I do agree. I thought he was really impressive at the Senior Bowl to kind of establish it's just not biasm. I am going to be a good NFL guy. So I do think the Bengals will take a running back and another offensive lineman. So I think for this sake, having Ali kind of stand out, he may be the best pick.
You think we should take him here or wait till the next pick?
I'd say maybe take him here just because there's no guarantee in the draft. If we're thinking we like him a lot more than the other guys, just take him while you can.
If we draft him, I will lose my crap of excitement. He's my favorite player in the draft. He's been one of the, like I said, one of the best running backs past couple of years. His freshman year in 2021, he led the country with rushing touchdowns, with 23 rushing touchdowns as a freshman. He had 1,400 rushing yards his freshman year. His past season, when they played Virginia Tech, he was a freaking beast. He had 2 rushing touchdowns and 174 rushing yards against Virginia Tech. This Marshall offense the last couple of years has completely been around Ali, which is something you don't really see often. A college offense completely evolves around a specific running back, but that's been the case. When he's not had 100 rushing yards, Marshall doesn't win games, and I feel like that's not a coincidence. it just shows how valuable he was to Marshall and how valuable he could be to an NFL team. But I really, 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 really hope we end up getting Ali here. So we're now in the 5th round, the 175th pick. Foster is still available. That's kind of somebody to maybe look at here. And then when you look at edge, linebacker Eichenberg's available. Safety, Tyke Smith. I'm kind of surprised he's available. Any certain players you're kind of looking at here?
Nobody in specific, not a ton of people I'm overly familiar with. I could see them going offensive line here. They've drafted offensive linemen on day 3 quite a bit, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round, whatever it may be. So I could see them doing that here. I'd rather it not be in this position. I think a defensive lineman who is probably edge is probably who the Bengals will go with here, because I do think defensive end is kind of an underrated position of need. No, Trey Hendrickson, he doesn't have too much time left here. Obviously, you hope Miles Murphy gets better. You hope he develops, and he did show a little bit of improvement throughout the season, but nothing I'm too comfortable with as we go into the offseason and the draft. So I can see them at least trying to get another guy, somebody to compete with in the offseason, maybe come in on special teams or be a pass rush specialist or whatever the situation may be. So I can see them drafting a guy like that here.
I really, really, really like Jalen Green, but I'd kind of be surprised if he went at 175. You think we should take Foster, the tackle from Missouri, then the next pick take Green? Because
Yeah.
I'd be shocked if Green was picked this early. Because it's one of those things, I think he should be, but he's just not on anybody's big board, which is just stupid to me. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And, like you said, edge is just an underrated need. You take Hendrickson away from the equation, we cannot sack anybody, it seems like. Somebody else, if it comes to, let's say, interior defense linemen, so we look at a defense tackle here, we'll take Green here with 196. The next pick, if he's available, which I doubt he would be, Jeremy Crowmaw, Green's teammate at James Madison, very, very underrated. This past season, I believe he had 10.5 sacks as defensive tackle, had several defense tackles for loss. He was very underrated. I mean, that was just a great James Madison defense this past season. So looking at some wide receivers here, Josiah Cephas was picked right before us, which sucks because he was somebody I was kind of looking at for us. Let's see. I'm trying to zoom in so we could. It's not letting me scroll down. But let's see. We already kind of got Foster, so we should be good at tackle. There's nobody. Micah Abraham, he's somebody to maybe watch. I wouldn't be surprised if he was drafted around this round. I think it's the only player in the country the last 3 seasons to get at least 15 passes defended each of the last 3 years. And his dad used to play for the Falcons years ago. He's somebody to maybe watch here towards the end of the draft. We've yet to take a corner. Is there any kind of certain players you're looking at here?
Really nobody in specific. Like I kind of said earlier, this is the part in the draft where I'm not too familiar with a lot of the day 3 guys that's outside of really Ohio State or Ohio University or teams close to them. Like those, for example, I don't think there's any Kent State players, but outside of remembering the names of guys who stood out against OU, I'm not overly familiar.
I'm the exact same way. Like if you had a good game against Marshall, I'm gonna remember you in draft time and just there's nobody to pick. Maybe this guy. He played pretty good against Marshall. But yeah, I'm the exact same way.
But yeah, I do like the idea of production, having 15 passes defended. That's a actual proven effective stat. And for that stat to be, obviously there's likely, if he's this far into the draft, there's likely other concerns, but if you show me ability to be able to defend the pass, be able to knock balls out, not give people a chance to catch it, that is enough to convince me to draft them.
Yeah, I was just double checking. I was right here. When you look at the last um, 3 seasons, he's had at least 15 passes defended. In the last 2 seasons combined, he's had 10 picks. So he's been pretty productive and really reliable for Marshall secondary the last couple of years. And we'll go ahead and take him here with 235. But so one final pick, kind of looking at some players. It sucks because it's not letting me scroll down, and I know their big board's kind of all jacked up. So players I'm used to normally taking, I can't tell if they're available. If I don't remember their names, it's kind of hard to type it in and stuff. So let's see here. I like. Let me see. I want to see if he's available. Clark from UTSA a little bit. He's available. That's somebody to maybe look at. I feel like if he played at a bigger school, he would be drafted much sooner. Let's see here. Trey Fluellen, he's somebody. It seems like the past couple of years, Cincinnati's normally took a safety or a corner with a 6th or 7th round pick. This past season it was DJ Ivy. Fluellen, the 2022 season, led Conference USA in tackles. Excuse me, he had over 90 tackles. 2022 season. See, it makes no sense. Like a guy from Michigan, I might know nothing about. But you give me like a Middle Tennessee guy, OU, Marshall, those guys. I know tons of stats about him. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Any kind of certain players you're looking at here with our final selection?
Really, nobody that said really I remember from watching them.
Only players that kind of stand out to me are Fluellen and DeCorian Clark, the wide receiver from UTSA. We drafted Pearsall already. I don't feel like it'd be bad if we got another wide receiver, but we've not taken a safety. I feel like either one of those players here would be good. Any certain position, anything like that?
I would say if we're looking for a certain position, maybe safety. But, as we're in the final pick, 7th round, it's more about just taking the best player available because really whoever you draft here isn't really going to have an effect on the team unless if it's some stud incredible pick like Io Savas, who they took in the 6th round. Like that was probably the best pick for the Bengals in that draft. And he did have an impact, but he didn't have a tremendous impact. He didn't make or break the season. So at best, that's the type of guy you're getting here. So I think based on position, safety, but I think the highest success rate would be wide receiver.
It's weird because when you look at these players, like Clark to me is probably the best wide receiver, but he's see here, he's 318 on the big board. That just doesn't really make any sense to me. But I'm kind of looking at DeCorian Clark. You're right here. Are you all right with that with the last pick here?
Yep, works for me.
And when you mentioned Yoshibashi, he was somebody who I wasn't really thrilled with when Cincinnati got him. I just knew he was fast. I didn't know much about him. And then he's a 6th round pick. He's not even a lock to make the team. And he's had multiple touchdowns this past season. He's a guy who, that rare instance, when you get best players available and he actually has somewhat of an impact his rookie season and like a 6th, 7th round pick, that's something you don't really see often. And it seems like that was something we kind of saw more in the Marvin Lewis era. Erickson was an undrafted free agent. He was our kick returner for several years. Burford was an undrafted free agent. I mean, beast for us for several years. But we haven't really seen that under the Zach Taylor era, and I feel like that's one thing that kind of the front office deserves more, I guess, heat for, is we cannot freaking draft day 3 players at all. You take away McPherson, there's nobody that stands out. I know Yoshibash was really good this past season. He's only played a year, and obviously the rate's going so far, he's definitely well worth that 6th round pick. But you mentioned Zach Carter earlier. Crap, I forgot he was a 3rd round pick. You already said that. You mentioned we talked about Shelvin. There's so many players who day 3 picks we just struck out on, and that I feel like that definitely has to change, especially if there's a scenario where we don't have a good off season like we did kind of in this simulator here.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's just there's so much uncertainty, especially since while the combine has technically started, it really hasn't started. So for all we know, a sudden fast receiver. He can put up fast numbers and suddenly be a top 10 pick. That was a nightmare. But it's just there's so much uncertainty how this will go. I do think this is a realistic mock draft for the Bengals. I think this would be a solid one, but it's just so hard to tell at this point.
I feel when you're looking at our free agency mock, we kept Reader, Tanner Hudson, Sample Tupou, Bailey. We signed George Fant. We signed Jacob Bailey. When it comes to that aspect, I feel like we probably had a D minus. Like it's not our fault, but it's nothing went our way for whatever reason. When you look at our draft, I think it was freaking phenomenal. I feel like really, there were several kind of players who didn't really fall as we wanted to, but overall, I think this is like an A+ draft. When you get Fuega, Leonard Taylor drops to 49, Ben Sinnott drops to 80. You get Pearsall, Ali, Foster, Jalen Green, one of the best edge rushers in this draft class with 196. Abraham, a very underrated corner for Marshall. DeCorian Clark, the wide receiver from UTSA. All these are best player available picks, and they also fit team needs. Anytime it's a team need, the best player available, it's automatic A+ pick. And we had several of those here. Ali, Pearsall, Jalen Green. I posted on Twitter, there's about 10 players who were like my draft guys this year. Those are 3 of them. I would be ecstatic if we got some of those guys here. But overall, I feel like if Cincinnati does something similar to this, it's interesting because we don't really expect this situation to happen when they kind of more so rely on the draft than free agency. But overall, I thought this offseason kind of mock here was pretty solid despite our unsuccessful, free agency when it came to signing players.
Yeah, completely agree. And no team is ever going to have the perfect offseason. There's always going to be a team walking into the draft with some team need or a team going aggressively for a player and just failing to sign him because of the length that took. Kind of get screwed over with other targets. That's just the reality of the NFL. So it's all about how you draft, how you recover from what didn't go your way. And that's how the offseason went. The Bengals happened to not sign anybody other than kind of their own and a punter and a low-end tackle. If that's how they responded in the draft. They're able to get a tackle who hopefully the Bengals don't ruin, a tight end, and just all the above. I really feel like that can really just not help the Bengals stay on track, but help them be a better team and more of a Super Bowl threat.
And it's one of those situations, the draft was great, but if you're Cincinnati, you don't want to rely on the draft because, like we said, you can't draft on day 3. You can't develop an offensive lineman. We offered a couple players several contracts, but if you're Cincinnati, you don't want to panic, but you almost maybe want to overpay a player just a tad bit so you for sure you have somebody locked up, whether it's a guy like George Fant if you strike out on, Brown and some other tackles, whether it's a guy like Everett who if you strike out on Noah Fant, if you strike out on Gesicki, Schultz, you almost have to overpay them just so you have that guy locked up so you for sure don't have to almost panic in the way you have to draft a team need in the draft over a best player available situation, which I hate them doing that. But with this scenario, I could see them maybe doing it more so a panic reason than compared to more so we're making our team best possible when you have glaring holes in your team that you weren't really able to approach in the offseason.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, like you said, battery thing showed up. Hopefully the Bengals don't walk into the draft, like you said, with that situation. Hopefully it's an A+. They're able to get guys like Everett, and then you can let a guy develop over a year and not – because the thing that scares me the most is just not drafting the best players available, but also just rushing them onto the field. That's where we see a lot of bust potential be explored. So, yeah, the Bengals need to hopefully able to get, with their signings, able to sign a few more. And I do agree I think there's going to be a situation where they may overpay for somebody. For example, like Everett, Bengals may think, okay, we need a tight end. We need to learn from last year's mistakes. So let's overpay him. And then that makes that tight end pick a little easier. Or maybe even if Bowers does fall, they have Everett on a 2-year deal. They're like, we got our tight end. Let's look at O-line. Now, I have no idea if that would happen or not, but just signing those guys, just like you said, not being in a position where you feel like you have to draft a certain position and you're just able to draft the best talent.
And we've kind of seen where Cincinnati doesn't necessarily panic, but they fixate on players too much, despite better players available and despite maybe more so glaring team needs. They fixated on players that make absolutely no sense whatsoever. Like Sample in 2019, it was ridiculous. I mean, Metcalf was there; we could have had him. It made no sense. And then a couple years later, Jackson Carman. We cannot afford whatsoever to have a dud pick like that if we don't kind of hit a home run in free agency, because we're relying on the draft. You can't do one of those stupid picks that we've done in the past that we do, it seems like about once a year. Because, I mean, when you look at Sample, Carman, Chauvin, there's about one or two every single season. We just cannot afford that. We have to pretty much hit a home run or close to it every pick. Free agency is somewhat similar to what this is.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully the Bengals are just not in that situation. I do think guys like Everett, if they attempt to sign him at the contract they had, maybe pay a tad bit more, but be able to sign him. Another guy like Reisner, I think those are type of guys the Bengals will understand they want and maybe pay a tad bit more to ensure that they're on the team, ensure that they have a little bit of freedom in the draft.
So when you're looking at this Bengals free agency mock, we're doing a free agency mock and being listed on our mock draft. That mock draft was a home run. I feel like overall it was very good. I would give it about an A grade. And then when you look at the free agency, it just did not pan out. We couldn't get players to sign for whatever reason. But kind of talking about that, free agency starts in a couple of weeks. The combine starts this week. I'm sure there's going to be lots of more draft talk, free agency talk. We're going to be doing more free agency and draft videos as we get closer to both of them. That kind of about does it. So, Braeden, can you kind of tell some of the listeners where they can follow you on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow me on Instagram, Bengals_NFL. That is where I am the most active. You can also follow me on X/Twitter, which is Bengals_action. And you can also follow me on TikTok, something that I've started getting more active on at Braeden G18.
Definitely make sure to put the links in the description below so people can check out your content. The best Bengal page on Instagram. Definitely make sure to follow him, the Bengals_NFL. You can follow me, the Sports Dude Hines Show on Instagram, S2 Hines Show on Twitter. If you're new to the channel or if you've already subscribed, make sure to like this video. Or if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. I would appreciate it. Thank you all so much for watching. I will see you all next time on the Sports Dude Hines Show.